Okay, so we need to run through turn on and turn off procedures for our oxyacetylene cutting torch. Two things we need to do to start with. One, we need to make sure that both of our adjusting screws are backed out, both the oxygen and the acetylene. And on our torch here, we need to make sure that our oxygen cutting torch valve is closed and that our acetylene torch valve is closed. Oxygen torch valve can stay all the way open. Now, we need to start with turning on our acetylene tank because that's lower pressure so we can charge the system. So we're going to turn it on slowly and then open it up so that it's no more than 1 to 1 1/2 turns. That way if something happens we can shut it down really quick. Once that's open and we have pressure in our acetylene tank pressure gauge, we're going to turn our acetylene adjusting screw in until we get to about 3 to 5 pounds of pressure here in our acetylene outlet pressure gauge. Once that's done, we can turn our attention to our oxygen. We're going to slowly open our oxygen tank valve all the way. Then we're going to turn in our oxygen adjusting screw until we get 20 to 25 psi. So it's going to be right around that first red arrow or just a little bit above that. Okay? So our oxygen outlet pressure gauge is set at about 20 to 25. Acetylene outlet pressure gauge is set at about 3 to 5. Next, we need to turn our attention here to our torch. We're going to open our acetylene torch valve about 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn. We want to open it enough that we're going to get some acetylene flow, not so much that we end up with a great big huge flame. Also make sure that you have your flint striker handy. So we're going to open this acetylene torch valve just a little bit and we're going to strike it. Could have opened it a little bit more, there we go. Okay, now if we notice right now we're getting a bunch of dark black smoke. We want to turn our acetylene torch valve until that smoke starts to turn lighter. Right there we have kind of a light gray color, which is what we want. Next, we're going to use our our oxygen cutting torch valve to start adding oxygen. And what we're looking for is that inner cone, right there we can see there's a bright spot kind of right in the middle, it's real big. We're looking for that cone to become the same size as those outer cones. Once we think we have that, we'll hit the oxygen lever, and we're looking for all those cones to stay the same size. They grow, so we need to add a little more oxygen. Whoops, wrong way. Right there, when we hit the lever, those inner cones, the one closest to the torch, stay the same size. Now we have a neutral flame and we're ready to cut. Now when it comes time to shut this down, it's important that we do this in the right order per the manufacturer's recommendations. We turn off our oxygen cutting torch valve so that it's just acetylene, and then we shut off our acetylene torch valve. That, according to them, is the proper way to shut that down. Remember not to crank those down too hard. We just turn them so that they're just barely tight so we don't mess up that needle valve in there. Now we're ready to shut down the rest of our unit here. It does not matter which order we shut the tanks off in, but both of them need to get shut all the way off so that they're good and tight. Now the next part is important that we do this in the right order because this is one of the biggest mistakes that we see people make. Next, I need to bleed my lines. Right now, I still have pressure within my oxygen regulator and within my acetylene regulator. I want to relieve that pressure. So I'm going to crack open, and I have a tendency to start with the acetylene torch valve. Open the acetylene torch valve and watch for my acetylene tank pressure gauge to drop to 0. Open it, I can hear it coming out. I see both of these have now dropped down to 0. So I can close my acetylene torch valve. Next, I'm going to hit the oxygen cutting torch lever and watch for the same thing. Watch both pressure gauges, outlet and tank pressure gauge, to drop to 0. Once those have dropped to 0, I back out both of my adjusting screws a couple of turns, not all the way, just enough so that when I open up the tank the next time, it's not going to immediately send pressure to our regulators or into our line. And that is proper turn on, turn off procedure for the oxyacetylene